What would you do if a chance encounter with a teenager uncovered secrets about your past you thought were lost forever? Detective Noah Carter never imagined a simple bracelet could change his life. Stick around, because this story will leave you speechless. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales. And let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? We'd love to hear from you. Detective Noah Carter adjusted his rearview mirror as he drove through the dimly lit streets of the quiet suburban neighborhood. The late evening air was crisp, and the golden glow of the streetlights reflected off the damp pavement. It was a routine drive home after a long day at the precinct, but something caught his eye, a teenage boy standing near the corner store, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Noah's instincts kicked in. Years of experience had taught him that a kid lingering near a store at this hour wasn't always up to no good, but it was worth checking out. He slowed his car, pulling over to the curb. As he stepped out, the boy stiffened, clearly noticing the tall, broad-shouldered figure in a trench coat making his way toward him. "Evening, kid," Noah said, keeping his voice calm but authoritative. "Everything all right?" The boy turned to face him, and Noah's breath caught in his throat. The streetlight illuminated the boy's face, and for a moment, it was as if he was staring at Lucas, his son, except Lucas had been gone for 5 years. Noah quickly shook off the haunting image and focused on the teenager before him. The boy, around 15 or 16, had a guarded expression. His hoodie was slightly too large for his lean frame, and his sneakers were scuffed, but it wasn't his appearance that struck Noah. It was the bracelet on his wrist, a silver band with a distinct pattern of entwined vines, an exact replica of the one Noah had given Lucas on his 14th birthday. "Hey," Noah said, his voice softening, his eyes fixed on the bracelet. "That's a nice bracelet. Where'd you get it?" The boy's hand instinctively moved to cover his wrist, his gaze wary. "It's mine," he said quickly. "Why do you care?" Noah crouched slightly to meet the boy's eyes, trying to appear less intimidating. "I'm not here to cause trouble, kid. It just looks familiar. Like one I used to know." The boy hesitated, then muttered, "My foster mom gave it to me. She said it was a gift or something. I dunno." "Your name?" Noah asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though his mind was racing. "Jordan," the boy replied, shuffling his feet. Noah nodded slowly, his thoughts swirling. "All right, Jordan. Just making sure you're okay out here. You heading home?" Jordan gave a small shrug. "Yeah. I was just waiting for my friend. I'll be fine." Noah didn't press further. The last thing he wanted was to scare the boy off. He reached into his pocket and handed Jordan his card. "If you ever need anything, you call me. Got it?" Jordan took the card but didn't respond. With a nod, Noah stepped back, watching as the boy pocketed the card and walked away into the night. As Noah returned to his car, he couldn't shake the image of the bracelet. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, memories flooding back. The bracelet wasn't just similar, it was identical. Noah had worked with a local jeweler to design that bracelet for Lucas, the vines symbolizing strength and resilience. It was one of Lucas's most prized possessions. After the accident, the bracelet had disappeared. Noah had searched for it everywhere, desperate to hold on to one more piece of his son, but it had seemingly vanished. And now, here it was, on the wrist of a boy he'd never met. Who was Jordan? How had he come into possession of something so personal? And why did he remind Noah so much of Lucas? As Noah drove home that night, his mind refused to rest. This wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. Something about the boy, and that bracelet, felt important. Noah didn't know what he was walking into, but one thing was certain, he wasn't going to let this go. Detective Noah Carter couldn't stop thinking about the boy, Jordan, and the bracelet. He spent most of the night tossing and turning, staring at the photograph of Lucas that hung on his bedroom wall. The image of the silver bracelet on Jordan's wrist played on a loop in his mind. How could it be the same bracelet? By morning, Noah was determined to uncover the truth. As he sipped his coffee and stared at his laptop, he began digging into everything he could find about Jordan. He pulled up the precinct's database and entered the boy's name, Jordan Harris. The file that appeared was sparse, much thinner than Noah had expected. Jordan, 16 years old, had been in the foster system for most of his life. His parents had reportedly died in a house fire when he was very young, and he had no known relatives. He had been in and out of several foster homes before landing with Ms. Reynolds, a single woman in her 40s who had taken him in about 2 years ago. Noah leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The foster system was notorious for losing or altering records, but something about Jordan's file seemed off. It lacked the usual detail, almost as if someone had deliberately stripped it down. "All right, Ms. Reynolds," Noah muttered to himself, "let's see what you know." That afternoon, Noah drove to the address listed in Jordan's file. The foster home was a modest, slightly run-down house on a quiet street. The paint on the exterior was peeling, and a rusted bike leaned against the porch railing. Noah stepped out of his car and knocked on the door. A tired-looking woman answered, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Yes?" she asked, eyeing him warily. "Ms. Reynolds?" Noah flashed his badge. "Detective Noah Carter. I'm here to ask a few questions about one of your foster kids, Jordan." Her expression softened slightly, but she remained cautious. "Is he in trouble?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "No, not at all," Noah assured her. "I just want to ask about something he's wearing, a bracelet." Ms. Reynolds tilted her head, confused. "A bracelet?" "Silver, with a vine pattern," Noah elaborated. "Jordan said you gave it to him." Realization dawned on her face. "Oh, that bracelet. I found it a couple of years ago at a thrift store. Jordan saw it and really liked it, so I gave it to him." Noah's heart skipped a beat. "Do you remember which thrift store?" Ms. Reynolds thought for a moment, then nodded. "It was Second Chances, over on Willow Street. I shop there a lot. They have a donation bin, and I found the bracelet in a box of random items near the counter." "Do you remember anything else about the box?" Noah asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She shook her head. "Not really. It was just a bunch of trinkets, some costume jewelry, an old keychain, stuff like that. Nothing else seemed special, but that bracelet stood out. Jordan wouldn't take it off after I gave it to him." Noah nodded, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. You've been very helpful." She hesitated, then added, "Detective, is there something wrong with the bracelet?" "No," Noah said quickly. "It's just personal." Noah drove straight to Second Chances, the thrift store Ms. Reynolds had mentioned. It was a small, cluttered shop tucked between a laundromat and a bakery. A bell jingled as he pushed open the door, and an older woman behind the counter greeted him with a warm smile. "Welcome to Second Chances," she said cheerfully. "How can I help you?" Noah stepped up to the counter, pulling out his phone and showing her a photo of Lucas wearing the bracelet. "I'm looking for information about this. A customer of yours said she bought it here a couple of years ago." The woman adjusted her glasses, studying the photo. "Oh, yes. I remember that bracelet. It came from a big donation we received a while back, lots of odds and ends. I remember because it was so unique." "Do you know who donated it?" Noah asked. The woman frowned, thinking. "Let me check." She disappeared into a back room and returned a few minutes later with a ledger. "Here it is," she said, pointing to a name. "It came from an estate sale. The family was clearing out items after a tragedy, I believe." Noah's stomach tightened as he read the name, Eleanor Davis. Eleanor Davis had been a close friend of his ex-wife, Emily. Noah's hands shook slightly as he closed the ledger. Do you remember anything else about the donation? The woman shook her head. I'm sorry. It was a large lot, clothes, some furniture, and a box of personal items. That bracelet was probably in the box. Noah nodded, forcing a polite smile. Thank you. You've been very helpful. As he walked back to his car, his mind raced. Eleanor Davis had stored many of Lucas's belongings after his death, helping Emily during her grief. Noah had always assumed the items were safe, tucked away as cherished memories. But somehow, they had ended up in a thrift store, where they were scattered to strangers. And now, one of those items had found its way to Jordan. Noah sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel. This wasn't just coincidence. The bracelet, Jordan, Lucas, it was all connected. I'm not stopping until I find out why, he whispered to himself, determination hardening his resolve. Detective Noah Carter couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. The discovery that Lucas's bracelet had ended up in a thrift store, and then on the wrist of a foster kid like Jordan, felt like more than coincidence. Noah was determined to find out how this had happened and what it could mean. Noah drove to the home of his ex-wife, Emily. It had been years since they'd spoken outside of brief and polite conversations, and even then, the topic of Lucas's death was something they both avoided. But now, there was no avoiding it. Emily opened the door, her expression surprised but guarded. Noah. Is everything all right? I need to talk to you about Lucas, Noah said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. Emily's face softened, and she stepped aside to let him in. What's going on? Noah sat on the edge of the couch, pulling the photograph of Lucas from his pocket. He placed it on the coffee table, the image of their smiling son staring back at them. Do you remember this bracelet? He asked, pointing to the silver band on Lucas's wrist in the photo. Emily's eyes widened, and she nodded. Of course. You had it made for him. He loved that bracelet. It's not just a memory anymore, Noah said. I saw it. Last night. On a boy named Jordan. Emily's brows furrowed in confusion. What do you mean you saw it? How could that be possible? That's what I'm trying to figure out, Noah replied. But I tracked it back to a thrift store. They said it came from a donation made by Eleanor Davis. Emily's face fell, and she covered her mouth with her hand. Oh, God, she whispered. What is it, Emily? Noah asked, his tone more urgent now. She looked away, tears welling in her eyes. After Lucas died, I couldn't bear to go through his things. It was too painful. Eleanor offered to take care of everything. She said she'd keep his belongings safe until I was ready. Noah's stomach sank. And instead, she gave them away. Emily nodded slowly. I had no idea. I thought she stored them. I didn't even want to think about it at the time. I couldn't. Noah clenched his fists, frustration and sorrow battling within him. Do you know how much of him was in those things, Emily? And now they're scattered to strangers. That bracelet was supposed to stay with Lucas. I'm sorry, Emily said, tears streaming down her face. I never meant for this to happen. I didn't know. Noah took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. I'm not blaming you. But I need to figure this out. That boy, Jordan. I think there's more to this than just a mistake. Noah's next stop was the courthouse, where he dug deeper into Jordan's foster records. He requested access to case files that weren't available in the precinct database, using his badge to get clearance. The file he received was as thin as the one he'd seen earlier, but something new caught his attention, a vague reference to Jordan's biological parents. Their names were listed as Daniel and Rachel Harris, but a note indicated that Jordan had been placed in the foster system following their deaths in a house fire. Noah frowned. Something about the record felt off, too brief, too neatly tied up. He dug further, contacting an old friend in child services who owed him a favor. What can you tell me about Jordan Harris's case? Noah asked over the phone. His friend, Susan, sighed. That's a complicated one. The agency that handled his case was shut down a couple of years ago for falsifying records. We think they were erasing or altering kids' histories to cover up issues with their placements. Noah's grip on the phone tightened. So, you're saying his records might not be real? It's possible, Susan admitted. We've been trying to piece things together for years, but some of the files were destroyed. Do you know anything about his biological family? Noah asked. Not much, Susan said. The fire that killed his parents destroyed most of their belongings. The details of his early life are vague at best. Noah's mind raced as he pieced together what he had learned. Jordan's history was a patchwork of incomplete records and possible fabrications. The fact that his case had gone through a corrupt agency only deepened the mystery. Noah returned to his precinct and began looking into other children who had been placed through the same agency. A pattern emerged: several kids had questionable records, missing documents, or redacted details. It was as if someone had intentionally erased parts of their lives. But why? And how did Jordan fit into this larger picture? As Noah pored over the files late into the night, something clicked. He pulled up Lucas's birth records and compared them to Jordan's file. His breath caught in his throat. Jordan's biological mother, Rachel Harris, shared the same maiden name as Emily, Rachel Lawson. Noah leaned back in his chair, his heart pounding. Could Rachel have been a relative of Emily's? Could Jordan be connected to his family in ways he hadn't realized? The more Noah thought about it, the more it made sense. The bracelet, the uncanny resemblance, the inexplicable bond he felt with Jordan, it wasn't just coincidence. Noah knew he needed answers, and fast. He resolved to confront Jordan and Lisa Reynolds again, this time armed with the information he'd uncovered. As he closed the file and turned off his desk lamp, one thought echoed in his mind: Jordan isn't just another foster kid. He's part of my story. And I'm going to find out how. Detective Noah Carter's mind raced as he processed what he had discovered. The connection between Jordan's biological mother, Rachel Harris, and his ex-wife, Emily Lawson, couldn't be a coincidence. Could Rachel have been a relative of Emily's? If so, that would make Jordan more than just another boy with Lucas's bracelet. It would make him family. The next morning, Noah drove back to Emily's house. The last conversation had been emotional, but now he had new questions that needed answers. Emily greeted him at the door, still visibly uneasy from their last talk. Noah, is everything all right? She asked hesitantly. I found something, Noah said, stepping inside. I need you to tell me about Rachel Lawson. Emily froze, her face pale. Rachel, she whispered. Yes, Noah pressed. She's listed as Jordan's biological mother. Is she related to you? Emily sank into the nearest chair, her hands trembling. She was my cousin, she admitted. We grew up together, but we drifted apart after I married you. I didn't even know she had a child. Noah's chest tightened. So you didn't know Jordan existed? Emily shook her head. No. After Lucas died, I shut myself off from everything and everyone. If Rachel reached out during that time, I wouldn't have known. Noah sat across from her, his voice soft but firm. Emily, this isn't just about the past anymore. Jordan is in the foster system. He's been bouncing from home to home, and he has Lucas's bracelet. There has to be more to this. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I don't understand how this all connects, Noah. But if Rachel was his mother, and he has Lucas's bracelet, maybe this is a way to make things right. That evening, Noah decided to visit Jordan at the foster home again. Ms. Reynolds greeted him at the door, surprised but welcoming. Detective Carter, she said, stepping aside. Jordan's in his room. Is everything okay? I just need to talk to him, Noah replied. He found Jordan sitting on his bed, flipping through a sketchpad filled with pencil drawings. The boy looked up, his expression wary but curious. "Hey, Jordan," Noah said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Mind if we talk?" Jordan shrugged. "Sure." Noah took a deep breath. "I found out something about your mom, Rachel." Jordan's eyes widened slightly. "You know about her?" "She was my ex-wife's cousin," Noah explained. "Which means, you might be part of my family." Jordan stared at him, his face unreadable. "Family?" he repeated quietly. "I don't know all the details yet," Noah admitted. "But it explains why I felt such a connection to you. And why that bracelet, it wasn't just a coincidence. It belonged to my son, Lucas. And somehow, it found its way to you." Jordan looked down at the bracelet on his wrist, his fingers brushing over the silver vines. "I don't remember much about my mom," he said softly. "I just know she always told me to hold on to hope, no matter what. Maybe this is what she meant." Noah decided it was time to dig deeper into Rachel's life. He visited the archives of the local newspaper, searching for any records related to Rachel's death and the fire that had left Jordan an orphan. What he found was chilling. The fire had been ruled accidental, but the investigation notes suggested otherwise. There were mentions of suspicious circumstances, evidence that pointed to arson, but the case had been closed without further inquiry. Noah's instincts told him this was no ordinary fire. Rachel's death might not have been an accident, and whoever was responsible might still be out there. As Noah continued to investigate, he uncovered another shocking detail: Rachel had been involved in a legal battle with a powerful real estate developer shortly before her death. She had refused to sell her family home, which was located in a prime location for development. The fire occurred just weeks after she won the case. Noah realized there was a darker side to this story, one that might explain why Jordan's records had been altered and why his past had been buried. Noah returned to Ms. Reynolds's home to speak with Jordan again. This time, he brought the file he had compiled on Rachel and the fire. "Jordan," Noah said gently, "I found out more about your mom. I think what happened to her wasn't an accident." Jordan's eyes filled with confusion and fear. "What do you mean?" Noah explained what he had discovered about the arson investigation and the legal battle. "I think someone wanted your mom out of the way, and they tried to erase your history to cover it up." Jordan's hands clenched into fists. "Why would anyone do that?" "Because she stood up to the wrong people," Noah said. "But we're going to get to the bottom of this. You deserve to know the truth about what happened to her, and why." That night, Jordan and Noah sat together, poring over the files and piecing together Rachel's story. For the first time, Jordan felt like he wasn't alone in the world, and Noah felt like he was fulfilling a promise to Lucas by helping the boy who had unknowingly carried his son's memory. As they worked, Jordan looked up at Noah. "Do you really think we're family?" "I don't just think it," Noah said, placing a hand on Jordan's shoulder. "I know it. And I'm not going to stop until we find justice, for Rachel, and for you." Jordan nodded, a small spark of hope igniting in his eyes. "All right. Let's do it." For Noah, this was no longer just an investigation. It was personal, and he was ready to fight for the boy who had somehow brought his broken family back together. The connection between Jordan and Detective Noah Carter was undeniable, but the mysteries surrounding Jordan's past and his mother's tragic death left questions that needed answering. Noah knew that the next step was to truly understand Jordan, not just the boy's history, but who he was now. That evening, Noah invited Jordan to spend time with him at a local park. It was a place Noah had often brought his son Lucas to play basketball and share quiet moments. The air was crisp, the sounds of distant laughter echoing as they sat together on a bench near the court. Noah handed Jordan a bottle of water and gestured toward the court. "You ever play?" Jordan shrugged, taking a sip. "A little. Not great at it, though." "Lucas wasn't great at first either," Noah said with a small smile. "But he loved it. We'd come here almost every weekend. He used to say it wasn't about winning, just about the fun of the game. Jordan glanced at him, his expression thoughtful. You miss him, don't you? Every day, Noah admitted. But you remind me of him in so many ways. Not just the bracelet. It's the way you carry yourself, like you've had to grow up faster than you should have. Jordan looked away, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing the bracelet on his wrist. I guess I have, he said quietly. It's been just me for as long as I can remember. My mom, she was all I had. When she died, it felt like the whole world just stopped. Noah's heart ached at the vulnerability in the boy's voice. What do you remember about her? Jordan hesitated before answering. Not much. Just bits and pieces. She used to sing to me at night, something about holding on, no matter how hard things get. She'd always say I was her reason for everything. After the fire, I was too little to understand what happened. They told me it was an accident, but... He paused, his voice trailing off. You never believed that, did you? Noah asked gently. Jordan shook his head. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like there's more to it, but no one ever talked about it. It's like my mom just disappeared, and I was supposed to move on. Noah felt a surge of anger, not at Jordan, but at the system that had failed him. The boy had been robbed of not only his mother but also the truth. And now, with everything Noah had uncovered about the suspicious circumstances of Rachel's death, he was more determined than ever to find justice. You shouldn't have had to go through that alone, Noah said, his voice firm. Your mom deserved better. And so do you. Jordan looked at him, a flicker of hope in his eyes. You really think there's more to her story? I don't just think it, Noah replied. I know it. And I'm going to help you find out what really happened. Over the next few days, Noah spent more time with Jordan, gradually earning the boy's trust. They worked together on piecing together Rachel's life, looking at old photographs and documents Noah had collected. Jordan was hesitant at first, but as they uncovered more details, he began to open up. One evening, while sorting through a box of papers, Jordan pulled out a worn notebook. This was hers, he said softly. Noah opened the notebook carefully. It was filled with handwritten notes, grocery lists, phone numbers, and fragments of what looked like journal entries. One page stood out. They're not giving up. I know they want the house, but this is my home, my son's home. I'll fight them to the end if I have to. Noah's pulse quickened. This is about the developers, he said. She was standing up to them. Jordan nodded. She always said no one could push her around. This is proof, Noah said, his voice resolute. Proof that she was under pressure. If we can connect this to the fire, we can reopen her case. The next day, Noah contacted a friend in the fire department who had been part of the original investigation. Together, they reviewed the old case file, focusing on the evidence of arson that had been overlooked. There were traces of accelerants, the firefighter admitted. But without witnesses or clear suspects, it was hard to prove anything. The case went cold. What about the developers? Noah asked. Could they have had a motive? The firefighter hesitated. It's possible. They were aggressive in trying to acquire properties in that area. But proving a connection after all this time. I'll find a way, Noah said. That evening, Noah sat with Jordan at a diner, both of them exhausted from the day's work. As they ate, Jordan finally broke the silence. Why are you doing all this? He asked. Noah looked at him, his expression serious. Because it's the right thing to do. Your mom deserves justice, and so do you. But it's more than that. You're not just some random kid to me, Jordan. You're family. Jordan's eyes widened, and for a moment, he looked like he didn't know how to respond. Family? Noah nodded. Your mom was connected to my ex-wife, which makes you part of my family. And family takes care of each other. Jordan stared at his plate, his voice barely above a whisper. I've never had that before. You do now, Noah said firmly. And I'm not going anywhere. As they left the diner, Jordan glanced up at Noah, his expression lighter than it had been in days. You really think we can figure this out? About my mom? I don't just think it, Noah said with a small smile. I know it. And we're going to do it together. For the first time in years, Jordan felt like he wasn't alone. And for Noah, the bond he was building with Jordan gave him a renewed sense of purpose, a chance to protect not just a boy, but the memory of the woman who had fought so hard for him. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next. The more Detective Noah Carter dug into Rachel's story, the clearer it became that her death was no accident. The fire that claimed her life and destroyed Jordan's home was only the tip of the iceberg. The deeper Noah went, the more sinister the truth became. He was no longer just chasing justice for Rachel, he was unraveling a tangled web of greed, corruption, and exploitation that went far beyond her death. Noah spent hours at his precinct, combing through old files and public records. He reviewed Rachel's legal battle with the real estate developers, focusing on the lawsuit she had won just weeks before the fire. The developers had wanted to buy her property for a major project, but Rachel had refused to sell. Her victory in court had been a blow to their plans. That's a motive if I've ever seen one, Noah muttered, flipping through the documents. But the connection between the developers and the fire wasn't enough to reopen the case. Noah needed more evidence. As Noah searched for answers, he received an unexpected phone call from Susan, his contact in child services. Noah, I've been looking into the foster agency that handled Jordan's case, she said. And? Noah prompted, sensing that she had uncovered something big. You were right. The agency wasn't just incompetent, they were corrupt. They erased or altered children's records to cover up irregularities in their placements. Jordan's file is full of red flags. What kind of red flags? Noah asked. For starters, his records were heavily redacted after the fire. And get this, the agency had connections to the same real estate developers Rachel was fighting in court. Noah's blood ran cold. You're saying the developers had ties to the agency that placed Jordan in the foster system? It looks that way, Susan confirmed. It's possible they tried to bury his history to avoid any scrutiny after Rachel's death. Noah clenched his jaw. This wasn't just about the fire. They wanted to erase Rachel and Jordan completely. Noah decided it was time to confront the real estate company head-on. He set up a meeting with the CEO, a smug, sharp-suited man named Gregory Langston. Langston welcomed Noah into his sleek, glass-walled office with an air of confidence. Detective Carter, what can I do for you? He asked, leaning back in his chair. I'm here about Rachel Harris, Noah said bluntly, watching Langston's expression closely. Langston's smile faltered slightly. That name sounds familiar. Wasn't she the woman who sued us a few years back? She didn't just sue you, she won, Noah said. And then her house mysteriously burned down, killing her and leaving her son an orphan. Langston's face hardened. Are you accusing me of something, detective? I'm asking questions, Noah replied. Like why your company had dealings with a foster agency known for falsifying records. Or why Rachel's death conveniently removed the last obstacle to your development plans. Langston's composure cracked for a moment, his eyes narrowing. Be careful with your accusations, detective. You're treading on thin ice. Noah leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. So are you, Langston. And I'm not stopping until I get the truth. Determined to prove the connection, Noah reached out to former employees of the foster agency. Most of them were unwilling to talk, but one woman, a caseworker named Linda Hayes, agreed to meet with him. Linda was nervous when they met at a quiet coffee shop, glancing over her shoulder as if she expected someone to be watching. I shouldn't even be talking to you, she said. I'm trying to help Jordan Harris, Noah said. And his mother. What happened to them wasn't right, and you know it. Linda hesitated, then sighed. The agency wasn't just incompetent, it was dirty. We took money from people to make cases disappear. Rachel's file was one of them. After the fire, the developers paid the agency to redact anything that tied them to her or Jordan. Noah's stomach churned. Do you have proof? Linda nodded. I kept copies of some of the documents. I couldn't stand what they were doing, but I was too scared to say anything back then. Not anymore, Noah said firmly. It's time to set things right. With Linda's help, Noah obtained copies of emails, financial records, and internal memos that directly tied the developers to the foster agency and the arson that killed Rachel. The documents revealed payments made to silence witnesses and alter records, painting a clear picture of a cover-up. Noah brought the evidence to his captain, who agreed to escalate the case to the district attorney. You've got enough to take them down, the captain said. Let's make sure they don't get away with this. That evening, Noah sat down with Jordan to explain what he had uncovered. The boy listened quietly, his expression a mix of anger and sadness. So, they killed her? Jordan asked, his voice trembling. They wanted her out of the way, Noah said gently. She was standing up to them, and they couldn't handle that. But they're not getting away with it. We're going to make sure they're held accountable. Jordan nodded, his jaw tight. She deserved better. She did, Noah agreed. And so do you. That's why I'm not stopping until we see this through. In the following days, law enforcement moved quickly. Gregory Langston and several executives from the real estate company were arrested on charges of conspiracy, arson, and corruption. The foster agency's remaining staff were also brought in for questioning, and their illegal practices were exposed to the public. The news was a whirlwind, but for Noah, it was a moment of vindication. He had kept his promise to Rachel and Jordan. As the dust settled, Noah and Jordan sat together on the porch of Noah's home. For the first time, Jordan seemed at peace. You really did it, Jordan said, looking at Noah with something like admiration. No, Noah said, smiling. We did it. You and me. Together. Jordan smiled back, the first genuine smile Noah had seen in a long time. Thanks, Noah. For everything. You don't have to thank me, Noah said. That's what family does. For the first time in years, they both felt like they had a future, one built on trust, justice, and the strength they had found in each other. Detective Noah Carter stood at the forefront of a growing storm. The evidence he had gathered against the real estate developers and the corrupt foster agency was irrefutable, but taking them down would require strategy, precision, and courage. For Noah, it wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about justice for Rachel Harris, Jordan's mother, and every child who had been lost in the cracks of a broken system. The morning after securing Linda Hayes's testimony and documents, Noah met with the district attorney, Rebecca Lang. Lang was a sharp, no-nonsense prosecutor known for her relentless pursuit of justice. This is solid, Lang said, flipping through the documents Noah had presented. Emails, payment records, testimony, you've built a hell of a case. They deserve to pay for what they did, Noah said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. Rachel Harris stood up to them, and they silenced her. They nearly erased her son's history to cover their tracks. We can't let that go unanswered. Lang nodded. I'll file charges against Langston and the other executives by the end of the day. As for the foster agency, we'll push for a full investigation into their practices. This could expose a lot of people. Noah exhaled, a mix of relief and determination settling over him. Good. Let's make it happen. That evening, Noah returned to Jordan's foster home to update him on the case. Ms. Reynolds, as always, greeted Noah warmly and gave them privacy in the small living room. Jordan sat on the couch, his knees pulled up to his chest, looking every bit the teenager grappling with emotions far too heavy for his age. Jordan, Noah began, sitting across from him. "We're filing charges against the people who hurt your mom." Jordan's eyes widened. "Really?" Noah nodded. "We have the evidence to prove they were behind the fire and that they tried to cover it up. They won't get away with it." Jordan looked down at his hands, his fingers nervously fiddling with the bracelet on his wrist. I thought no one cared about what happened to her. For so long, it felt like she just disappeared." Noah leaned forward, his voice firm but gentle. "Your mom mattered, Jordan. She fought for you, for your home. And now, we're fighting for her. You're not alone in this." Jordan's eyes filled with tears, but he quickly wiped them away. "Thank you," he whispered. "For not giving up." Noah reached out, placing a reassuring hand on Jordan's shoulder. "We're in this together." The next few days were a whirlwind. Gregory Langston and his associates were arrested in a high-profile operation, their faces plastered across news outlets as the story broke. Charges of conspiracy, arson, and corruption sent shockwaves through the community, and the public demanded accountability. Simultaneously, the foster agency's records were seized, exposing years of unethical practices. Dozens of children's cases were re-examined, and the agency's directors faced charges for their role in the cover-up. For Noah, watching Langston led out of his glass-walled office in handcuffs was a moment of vindication. The man who had orchestrated so much pain and suffering was finally facing justice. Noah and Jordan watched the news coverage together that evening. Langston's mugshot appeared on the screen, accompanied by headlines detailing the charges against him. "Looks like they're finally getting what they deserve," Jordan said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "They are," Noah agreed. "And it's because you didn't give up. You kept holding on, just like your mom taught you." Jordan smiled faintly, his fingers still brushing the silver bracelet on his wrist. "She'd be proud, wouldn't she?" "More than you know," Noah said. In the weeks that followed, Noah worked closely with child services to ensure that Jordan's case, and others like his, received the attention they deserved. The fallout from the investigation led to sweeping reforms in the foster system, with new measures put in place to protect vulnerable children. Noah also testified in court against Langston and his associates, sharing Rachel's story and the evidence that had been uncovered. The trial was grueling, but the verdict was clear: guilty on all counts. The developers and the foster agency's directors faced lengthy prison sentences, and their crimes were publicly condemned. With the legal battles behind them, Noah and Jordan began to focus on building their relationship. Noah had come to see Jordan as more than just a boy who reminded him of Lucas; he was family. And for Jordan, Noah was the first person who had ever truly fought for him. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of Noah's home, Jordan hesitated before speaking. Do you think my mom would be okay with this? With us?" Noah looked at him, his expression filled with warmth. "Your mom fought for what was right. She stood up for what she believed in. And she loved you more than anything. I think she'd be glad to know you're with someone who cares about you as much as she did." Jordan nodded, a small smile breaking through his usual guarded demeanor. "I'm glad I'm here, too." Though the journey hadn't been easy, Noah and Jordan had found something rare and beautiful in the aftermath of tragedy: hope. Together, they honored Rachel's memory by living the values she had fought for: courage, resilience, and love. For the first time in years, Noah felt like he was no longer defined by the loss of his son. And for Jordan, the boy who had been lost in the system, there was finally a place to call home. Their story wasn't over, but they were ready to face whatever came next. Together, the whirlwind of investigations, arrests, and court trials had finally come to a close. Detective Noah Carter and Jordan Harris had faced more challenges in the past few months than many people do in a lifetime. But as the dust settled, they both knew one thing for certain: this wasn't the end of their journey, it was the beginning of something new. Noah had spent countless hours thinking about the bond he had formed with Jordan. What had started as a strange encounter tied to a bracelet had turned into something far more profound. For the first time since Lucas's death, Noah felt like his life had purpose again. He wasn't just a detective, he was a father figure to Jordan. Sitting across from Jordan one evening, Noah decided it was time to talk about the future. They were in Noah's living room, sharing a pizza after a long day of volunteering at a community center. "Jordan," Noah began, setting his plate down. "There's something I want to ask you." Jordan looked up, his mouth full of pepperoni pizza. "What's up?" he mumbled. Noah smiled. "How would you feel about making this official? I want to adopt you." The room fell silent. Jordan's eyes widened, and he set his slice down slowly. "Adopt me?" Noah nodded. "You're already family to me, Jordan. But I want to make sure you never have to feel like you're on your own again. What do you think?" Jordan stared at him, emotion flickering across his face. For a moment, Noah worried he had said the wrong thing. Then, Jordan's lips curled into a small but genuine smile. "I think I'd like that," he said softly. Noah's chest swelled with emotion, and he reached over to clasp Jordan's shoulder. "All right, then. Let's make it happen." A few weeks later, Noah and Jordan found themselves standing in a family courtroom. It was a far cry from the intense criminal cases Noah was used to. This room was filled with warmth, sunlight streaming through the large windows. The judge, an older woman with kind eyes, reviewed the paperwork and smiled at the pair standing before her. "Jordan," the judge said, addressing him directly, "do you understand what this means? Detective Carter will legally become your father." Jordan nodded, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I understand. And I want this." The judge turned to Noah. "And you, Detective Carter? Are you ready to take on the responsibilities of being Jordan's father?" Noah looked at Jordan, his heart full. "I've been ready from the moment I met him, Your Honor." The judge smiled warmly. "In that case, it's my pleasure to grant this adoption. Congratulations, Mr. Carter." As the gavel fell, Jordan turned to Noah and grinned. "So, I guess you're stuck with me now, huh?" Noah chuckled, pulling Jordan into a tight hug. "You've got that backward, kid. I'm the lucky one." That evening, Noah invited Jordan, Ms. Reynolds, and a few close friends to his home for a small celebration. Emily, Noah's ex-wife, even stopped by, bringing a homemade cake. "I couldn't miss this," Emily said, hugging Jordan. "Your mom would be so proud of you." Jordan smiled, his eyes misting over. "Thanks," he said quietly. As the group gathered in the living room, Noah raised a glass of sparkling cider. "To Jordan," he said. "For his courage, his strength, and for showing me what family really means." "To family," Jordan added, raising his own glass. The room erupted in cheers and laughter, and for the first time in years, Noah felt whole. Later that night, after the guests had left and the house was quiet, Noah and Jordan sat together in the living room. On the coffee table between them sat a framed photograph of Rachel and Lucas, placed side by side. "You know," Noah said, his voice soft, "your mom and Lucas, they'd get along. They were both fighters." Jordan nodded, his gaze fixed on the photos. "I hope they're proud of us." "They are," Noah said firmly. "No doubt about it." Jordan reached down and touched the bracelet on his wrist, the silver vines glinting in the light. "I'm going to keep wearing this," he said. "It's like they're always with us." Noah smiled. "I think that's exactly what they'd want." The days that followed were filled with new routines and a growing sense of normalcy. Noah helped Jordan adjust to life in his home, teaching him how to cook, helping with school projects, and even learning to play video games, much to Jordan's amusement. For Jordan, life no longer felt like a series of temporary stops. He had a home, a family, and a future filled with possibilities. And for Noah, the emptiness left by Lucas's death was no longer consuming. It had been filled with love, purpose, and the bond he now shared with Jordan. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jordan turned to Noah and said, "You think we'll ever stop fighting for what's right?" Noah smiled, placing a hand on Jordan's shoulder. "Not a chance. That's what family does, we stand up for each other, no matter what." Jordan grinned. "Good. I like being part of this family." "You're not just part of it," Noah said. "You're the heart of it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, father and son sat together, ready to face whatever came next, knowing they were no longer alone. Together, they had turned tragedy into hope, and the future was theirs to build. This story is a powerful reminder that sometimes, life has a way of bringing people together in the most unexpected ways. Noah and Jordan's journey was filled with heartbreak, mystery, and ultimately, hope. It's a testament to the strength of family, whether it's the one you're born into or the one you build along the way. If this story moved you as much as it moved us, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of love, resilience, and redemption. We'd love to have you join our growing community.